Picture this. You're standing alone in a desert wilderness, tending sheep that aren't even yours. You're 80 years old. A fugitive, a murderer. You've spent the last 4 decades running from the life you once had, convinced your best days are behind you. Then you see it. A bush engulfed in flames, but refusing to burn. And from within that impossible fire, a voice speaks your name twice. Moses. Moses. What happened next at that burning bush wasn't just a conversation. It was the moment when the invisible God chose to reveal the most powerful name in human history. A name that would shake empires, redefine existence itself, and echo through millennia. But here's what most people miss. The name God revealed wasn't meant to describe him. It was meant to change everything about how we understand reality, presence, and what it means to truly exist. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you will completely transform how you read the Bible. Moses stood there, sandals off, face hidden in reverence and terror. The voice from the flames had just commissioned him with an impossible task: return to Egypt and demand that Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler on earth, at least 2 million Hebrew slaves. Moses, practical and skeptical after 40 years in the desert, asked the obvious question. But it wasn't the question you might expect. He didn't ask, how? He didn't ask, why me? Moses asked for God's name so he could tell the Israelites who had sent him. Because in the ancient world, especially in Egypt, names carried power. Names revealed nature, authority, and domain. The Egyptian pantheon teemed with deities, each with elaborate names that defined their roles. Ra, the sun god. Isis, goddess of magic and motherhood. Horus, god of kingship and sky. Set, god of chaos and storms. Each name declared a limited jurisdiction, a specific sphere of influence, a bounded existence. Moses knew the Israelites would demand credentials. They'd been surrounded by Egyptian gods their entire lives in bondage, temples on every corner, statues at every intersection. Each deity with a name, a story, a birth, and yes, even death myths. In that world of countless gods competing for worship and allegiance, how do you introduce the God of the universe? Before I tell you God's answer, hit that subscribe button. Because what comes next is going to blow your mind, and you don't want to miss where this is heading. God's response was Ehyeh, commonly translated as I am who I am. Now stay with me, because this isn't just religious poetry. The Hebrew word Ehyeh comes from Ehyeh, meaning to be, and can mean both I am and I will be. Think about that for a second. Every other deity Moses knew had a name that described what they did. God gave a name that described that he simply is. No qualifications, no limitations, no beginning or end tense. Just pure, unqualified existence. Then God told Moses, say this to the people of Israel. I am has sent me to you. The Hebrew drops the elaborate phrase and becomes even more stark. Yeah, I am, period, full stop. But here's where it gets mind-bending. That wasn't even the full revelation. God continued, say this to the people of Israel. The Lord, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, has sent me to you. This is my name forever. That word Lord in your English Bible, it translates the Hebrew name Yahweh. Now here's what scholars have discovered that changes everything. Yahweh is the third-person form of the same verb, meaning he is, or he exists. God essentially said, when I speak of myself, I say I am. When you speak of me, you say he is. It's the same eternal, self-existent reality from different perspectives. You have to understand how revolutionary this was. Picture the scene. Moses would return to Egypt with this name. The Israelites had lived their entire lives surrounded by Egyptian polytheism. The Egyptians were the most polytheistic people in the ancient world, with so many overlapping gods that even today scholars can't determine the exact number. Every god had a birth story. Every god had a family tree. Every god competed with other gods for power and worshippers. Every god had limitations, territories, and could be negotiated with or played against each other. Then Moses comes back and says, the God who sent me, his name is I am. He doesn't have a beginning because he is existence itself. He wasn't born. He doesn't compete. He has no territory because all territories exist because he is. You can't negotiate with him because everything that exists depends on him for existing. I am. The name YH appeared in Egyptian records as early as 1400 BCE. But here's the fascinating detail. The Egyptians never built temples to Yahweh, never created artistic representations, never discussed him in their texts, placing him in a category all by himself. Even Egypt, drunk on its own pantheon of deities, recognized something utterly different about this name. This wasn't another god joining the marketplace of divine beings. This was the claim that shook the foundation of every religious system in the ancient world. And I want you to see something else most people miss. Leave a comment below with your thoughts on what I'm about to show you. Why did God appear in a burning bush? The fire was in the bush, but not of the bush. Not using the bush for fuel, burning from its own power, self-generated. See what God was doing? The burning bush was a living picture of the name itself. Self-existent, self-sustained, requiring nothing outside. Himself to continue existing. The bush that burns but is unconsumed represents the possibility of dwelling in the presence of holy fire without being destroyed. This was a preview of what God intended for his people. They could come near this all-consuming holiness and not be obliterated because he chose to sustain them in his presence. Ancient Near Eastern people knew about ordeal by fire. If you survived the flames, the gods had vindicated you. The burning but not consumed bush was an ordeal symbol, representing encountering death and being divinely spared. But this bush represented something even more profound. Israel itself would become the burning bush. 4 centuries of slavery in Egypt, the furnace of affliction trying to consume them, yet they would not be destroyed. Why? Because I Am was with them? Self-existent God dwelling with his people, sustaining them by his own power, just like that flame sustained itself. The symbolism goes even deeper. The Hebrew word for bush, senai, appears only twice in Scripture, both describing the burning bush, and is likely a wordplay on Sinai. God was previewing what would happen at Mount Sinai, when he would descend in fire to give his law and establish his covenant. The mountain would burn, but not be consumed. God's presence would terrify and purify, but not destroy those he called his own. But here's the part that hits different when you really understand it. Yahweh is God's personal name, so closely identified with his being that many Orthodox Jews refuse to pronounce it, saying Hashem or Adonai instead. Why? Because when you understand what this name actually means, you realize you can't be casual about it. You can't take it lightly. This isn't a name that describes what God does. It's the name that declares what God's name fundamentally relates to his faithfulness to his people. When God tells Moses, I will be with you, he uses the same Hebrew verb, Ehyeh. I am will be with you. You see what he's doing? The self-existent one promises his presence. The one who needs nothing promises to give everything. This is why the name appears over 6,000 times in the Hebrew Bible. Every single time you see Lord in small capitals. In your English Bible, that's YHWH, the covenant name, the personal name, the name that says, I am here, I am present, I am faithful, I am enough. Like this video and drop your biggest takeaway in the comments, because what I'm about to show you connects this ancient name to your life right now. Fast forward 1,500 years. A Jewish teacher stands before hostile religious leaders who want him dead. They're interrogating him about his claims. The conversation escalates. Then Jesus says something that detonates like a theological nuclear bomb. Before Abraham was, I am. Not I was. I am. The crowd understood instantly. They'd picked up stones to kill him for blasphemy. Why? Because Jesus just claimed the name God revealed to Moses at the burning bush. He identified himself as YHWH, the self-existent one, the eternal I am, throughout John's Gospel. Jesus makes 7 I am statements. I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the door. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and life. I am the way, truth, and life. I am the true vine. Each statement wasn't just description. Each was a claim to divinity. Each invoked the name from the burning bush. The invisible, self-existent God had taken on flesh and was walking among them. Jesus used the term I am to express his divinity, saying, before Abraham was born, I am. The ultimate revelation of I am came through crucifixion and resurrection. Death itself couldn't consume him. Like the bush that burned but wasn't destroyed, like Israel that endured affliction but wasn't eliminated. Jesus died and rose because he is life itself, self-existent, self-sustained, eternal. Here's where this stops being ancient history and becomes intensely personal. The God who revealed himself as I am didn't give that name just for theological speculation. He gave it as an invitation and a promise. When God says I am, he's declaring that he doesn't become something or evolve into something. He simply is. That means yesterday, today, and tomorrow, his nature doesn't change. His faithfulness doesn't fluctuate. His power doesn't diminish. The God who met Moses in the desert is the same God who meets you and yours. The God who heard the cries of Hebrew slaves hears your prayers. The God who promised his presence with Moses promises his presence with you. I will be with you. That's not a prediction. That's the nature of I am. Present tense. Right now. In your circumstances, your struggles, your questions, your pain, you don't need him to become something he isn't. You need to encounter who he already is. And here's the beautiful tension in that name. God simultaneously reveals himself and remains mysterious. The meaning of Ehyeh is debated and might be seen as a promise or as a statement of incomparability. I am who I am can also mean I will be what I will be. In other words, you'll discover more of who I am as you walk with me. You'll see new dimensions of my nature as you need them. I'm not limited by your current understanding. I am beyond your categories while being intimately present in your life. The burning bush teaches us this. We can approach the holy fire of God's presence without being consumed. Not because we're fireproof, but because he sustains us in his presence by his power alone. Subscribe if you haven't yet. Hit the notification bell. Because next week we read diving into what happened when this self-existent God led Israel out of Egypt, and the entire world learned what happens when I am goes to war. Moses left that burning bush a changed man. Not because he suddenly became capable or confident. He still protested. He still felt inadequate. But he had encountered I am, and that encounter was enough. The same invitation stands before you. The God who needs nothing offers you everything. The God who depends on nothing invites you to depend entirely on him. The God who exists because he is existence itself invites you to find your existence in him. This isn't about religion. This is about reality. The fundamental nature of existence itself spoke from a burning bush and said, I am. The question isn't whether God exists. The question is whether you'll respond to the one who is. Leave a comment telling me what part of this hit you hardest. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the God who meets us in our deserts and burning bushes. And remember, you're not encountering a God who might help or who possibly cares. You're encountering I am, the self-existent, self-sustaining, eternally present God who is, and who will be everything you need him to be. That's not a promise he makes. That's who he is,